Coming up today, as President Park Geun-hye gears up to leave Kenya for France, we take a look back at the South Korean leader's historic three-nation tour of Africa. North Korea is on a charm offensive with China as it looks to rebuild relations with Beijing following its recent provocations. One of Pyongyang's top diplomats is expected to meet with the Chinese president in the coming hours. Plus, more bad news for the economy. South Korea's exports tumble for the 17th straight month in May, but the rate of decline slows sharply. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Wednesday, the 1st of June. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. We are going to begin in Kenya. President Park Geun-hye's three-nation swing through East Africa is drawing to a close now. The South Korean leader will return to Seoul this weekend with a number of promising economic and political achievements under her belt. Our Song Ji-son, who is traveling with the president, has a rundown of the Africa trip thus far.
President Park Geun-hye became the first South Korean leader to lay out her vision at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa. She offered to share South Korea's assets and know-how in helping the continent achieve its Vision 2063 for growth and development.
이를 위해 한국은 그동안 쌓아온 경험과 지식, 마음을 여러분과 나누면서 함께 성장하고 상생 발전해가는 협력의 파트너십을 만들어 갈 것입니다.
In return, President Park wants support for economic and security goals. Securing entry into the potentially lucrative African market, Seoul agreed to introduce industrial complexes in the three nations, Ethiopia, Uganda, and Kenya, while taking a bigger role in their respective infrastructure and ICT projects. Deals with the three biggest economies in the region also guarantees greater access to other continents.
President Park's Africa visit will add momentum to Korea's exports as it secures entrance not only into the African market, but also sets the base to enter the US and European markets.
The three nations also vow support for Park's drive to denuclearize North Korea, even from the regime's longtime ally, Uganda.
Uganda has been friendly with North Korea, but its decision to fully implement UN sanctions on Pyongyang will encourage other leading African nations to join the move.
Seoul's new development aid program, the Korea Aid, was also introduced in the three nations. Under the program, Turks offering healthcare and cultural content will help Korea establish a stronger footprint in Africa.
In addition to earning support for discouraging North Korea from its nuclear ambitions, Park cemented cooperation for mutual growth with the East African countries. Park's focus will now shift to growth for the future en route to Paris, where she and French President François Hollande will see ways to foster the creative economy. Song Ji-son, Arirang News, Nairobi.
Now, President Park Geun-hye is spending her final few hours in Nairobi before jetting off, as we heard, to Paris. For a closer look, though, at how the South Korean leader's first ever visit to Kenya is expected to enhance cultural cooperation between the two countries, E.G. Won reports.
Korea has been actively launching events in Kenya, from an annual film festival to quiz events, to not only raise its profile in the African country, but also establish a better understanding of Korean culture. Such efforts have led to the Korean martial art of Taekwondo to gain popularity in Kenya, with an estimated 7,000 learning it as of this year. It's growing as a competitive sport with around 200 athletes competing in the 2014 Ambassadors Cup. 500 are expected to compete in this year's competition in October.
Taekwondo is quite popular in Kenya, and the country makes great effort to teach it to students. The vice president of Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology said he sees Taekwondo as more than just a sport, as it also teaches sincerity and diligence.
In exchange, efforts are also made to share Kenyan culture with Koreans. Africa Insight is a NGO based in Seoul that provides Koreans with opportunities to learn more about the African continent.
Not many Koreans see African nations as separate countries. They also see Africa as extremely poor, even though it's developing quite quickly. So through forums, exhibitions and festivals, we're seeking to change such misconceptions.
In April, the NGO organized the first Whole Africa Festival, where visitors were able to sample African food, make their own African paintings, and enjoy African culture.
We don't have many opportunities to learn about or experience African culture in Korea, so events like these are really interesting and helpful.
And with President Park's visit to Kenya, even more cultural exchanges are expected between the two countries, helping to build new relationships and broaden understanding between Koreans and Kenyans. 이지원, Arirang News.
Now, in other news, the United States has denounced North Korea for its attempted ballistic missile launch on Tuesday and urged the regime to refrain from actions that stoke tension in Northeast Asia. Park Jong-hong with the details.
Responding to North Korea's failed launch of a medium-range Musudan missile, the White House issued words of condemnation. The White House spokesman said the U.S. and the rest of the world are calling on Pyongyang to refrain from provocations that stir tension in the region.
The United States strongly condemns North Korea's missile test in violation of United Nations Security Council resolutions, which explicitly prohibit North Korea's use of ballistic missile technology.
The spokesman added that North Korea should take concrete steps to fulfill its international obligation to denuclearize. His message was echoed by the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs. Daniel Russell said the primary objective is to have North Korea agree on denuclearization, and in particular, this outcome does not translate into a, quote, unconditional surrender. Russell said annual strategic talks with China next week will be used to ensure Beijing's cooperation in pressuring North Korea to agree to negotiate an end to its nuclear program. As for the unexpected visit by North Korea's Workers' Party Vice Chairman Lee Soo-yong to China, the State Department declined to comment when asked about the effects of the visit on the political situation on the Korean peninsula. Park Jong-hong, Arirang News.
Now, North Korea is showing possible signs of reprocessing spent nuclear fuel to make plutonium nuclear bombs, citing satellite images taken in late May. US-based North Korea monitoring website 38 North says there were container tanks in front of the country's main reprocessing plant in Yangbyon and smoke coming out of a coal-fired plant. It added that there were also 2 railroad flat cars next to the plant, which could have been carrying chemicals needed for reprocessing. The reactor is thought to be capable of producing approximately 6 kilograms of plutonium each year. That is enough to develop 2 nuclear bombs. The reactor produced plutonium for North Korea's first 3 nuclear bomb tests in 2006, 2009 and 2013. North Korea has revealed what its top diplomat Lee Soo-yong said to Chinese officials on Tuesday, the first day of his unannounced trip to Beijing. It seems Pyongyang is trying to mend fences with its longtime ally. There's also speculation Lee could meet with the Chinese President Xi Jinping in the coming hours. Connie Kim with the details.
North Korea has confirmed that one of its high-ranking officials, Lee Soo-yong, met on Tuesday with Song Tao, the head of the Chinese Communist Party's international department in Beijing. The North Korean Central News Agency said Wednesday that Lee, the regime's former foreign minister, but now vice chairman of the Workers' Party, emphasized the importance of the Pyongyang policy of pursuing nuclear weapons in parallel with economic development. The agency said the Chinese official expressed support for the North's pursuit of development under the leadership of Kim Jong-un and said he hoped North Korea could achieve the goals it announced during the recent Workers' Party Congress in Pyongyang. Lee Soo-yong's visit to China is a first by a senior North Korean official since the regime conducted its 4th nuclear test in early January. It's thought Pyongyang is seeking to mend ties with China, as bilateral relations have soured following Beijing's decision to fully implement the latest UN sanctions on the North. Lee will reportedly meet Chinese President Xi Jinping on Wednesday, on the second day of his 3-day stay in China.
Lee's trip to Beijing will likely come up during talks in Japan on Wednesday between the chief nuclear envoys of Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo. The strongest UN sanctions on North Korea were imposed early this year following its fourth nuclear test and long-range ballistic missile launch. Pyongyang flouted the resolutions yet again on Tuesday when it attempted to test fire a mid-range Musadan ballistic missile. South Korea and the U.S. say the test appears to have been a failure. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
4 workers have been killed and at least 10 injured after a subway construction site east of Seoul collapsed this morning. Police say the number of casualties could increase as some of the victims are said to be in critical condition. The site in the city of Namyangju was rocked by an explosion at 7:20 a.m. with one witness saying the blast was so powerful it shook buildings nearby. 17 workers were doing welding work on the site when the blast occurred. Those buried under debris were rescued and immediately transported to nearby hospitals for treatment. Police believe an oxygen cylinder at the site exploded, but an investigation into the exact cause is underway. The negative news on the trade front continues to roll in, with Korea's exports on a downward spiral for the longest period ever now. However, in what could be a reason for a glint of hope, the pace of decline in May slowed to its lowest level so far this year. Kim Min-ji with the details.
Korea's exports took another dive in May, extending the downward trend to a record 17th straight month. The Trade Ministry says outbound shipments fell 6% from a year ago to $39.8 billion. Despite the negative growth, the pace of decline was the slowest since November of last year. This year, exports have posted double-digit drops every month, with the exception of March.
Despite weak external conditions, there was a turnaround in exports of computers, home appliances and petrochemicals, as well as an improvement in shipments of semiconductors and auto parts.
Imports tumbled 9.3% on year to $32.7 billion, also falling for the 17th straight month. With that, the trade surplus in May came to $7.1 billion, extending the surplus streak to 52 months or well over 4 years. As with previous months, what's worrisome is that the surpluses have mainly been driven by a sharp decrease in imports rather than an uptick in exports. The ministry said despite weak external conditions, such as the global economic slowdown and prolonged slump in oil prices, Korea still has the momentum for an export recovery. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now staying with economic news, and Korea's inflation rate slowed last month as prices for fresh farm produce plunged and utilities fell. Statistics Korea says consumer prices rose 0.8% in May from a year earlier, down from the 1% growth posted in April. Now the prices of agricultural goods fell around 28% last month. Petroleum products continue to pull prices down overall as well, falling over 11% from a year ago. Core inflation, which excludes volatile agricultural and oil prices, that, however, was up 1.6%. The population of Seoul has shrunk below the 10 million mark for the first time in 28 years. According to data from the Interior Ministry released on Wednesday, Seoul's population was 9.9 million as of May. That's 19% of South Korea's entire population of around 52 million, in contrast to around 25%, a quarter, in 1992. The population of the capital has declined for the past 15 months as more and more people move out of the city to live in the nearby Gyeonggi-do province. Experts say it will be difficult for the population to bounce back up to the 10 million mark because of high housing prices and the country's chronically low birth rate. Korea is seeking UNESCO Memory of the World status for the tens of thousands of women who were forced into sexual slavery by Japan during World War II. Japan's Kyodo News Agency reports that civic groups from Korea, China and the Netherlands submitted 2,700 documents related to the so-called Comfort Women issue to UNESCO on Tuesday local time. The Korean civic group has been pushing for the victims to be granted the UNESCO status, saying it's a way to seek justice for the horrors they face. The group held a briefing session, in fact, in Seoul This morning, historians estimate up to 200,000 women and girls, many of whom were Korean, were forced to serve Japanese troops before and during World War II. The US State Department has issued an alert for tourists heading to Europe in the summer, saying the entire continent is vulnerable to terrorism. The last alert was issued after the ISIS bombings in Brussels in March, which killed 32 people, including 4 Americans. The department listed major events, tourist sites, restaurants, commercial centres and public transportation as possible targets. Now, the newest alert also specified 2 events as being exceptionally risky. First, the European Soccer Championships Euro 2016, which France hosts from June 10th to July 10th, and also the Catholic Church's World Youth Day, which will be held in Poland in July. The travel alert will remain in effect through August 31st. Well, that's all we have for now on this Wednesday lunchtime here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. And we'll be back throughout the day with more newscasts. Our next scheduled bulletin coming up at 3 p.m. Korea time. So until then, goodbye.